Hello and welcome to the first edition of Business 360 in 2023. I'm Shireen Bhan and the headlines we're tracking for you this evening. The Supreme Court upholds the union government's decision-making process which led to the demonetization of 500 and 1,000 rupee notes in 2016. 4 judges ruled that the decision was proportional and does not suffer from any flaw. 1 judge dissents, saying Parliament should have been consulted, adds RBI was not given enough time to apply its mind. Indian equities begin the new year on a firm footing. The sensex and the nifty gain nearly 1% each, supported by metals and mining stocks. The rupee retreats from early strength to end flat as banks buy dollars on behalf of importers. Manufacturing activity picks up pace in India. The Purchasing Managers Index is at a 26-month high, marking the highest increase in new factory orders and production in over 2 years. Sale of commercial vehicles and tractors drive growth for the auto industry in December. Maruti's car sales disappoint. Bajaj Auto marks a slowdown in exports. With less than a month for the union budget, the economic wing of the RSS says Chinese imports are hurting India's manufacturing sector, resulting in capacity underutilization. Calls for an across-the-board increase in tariffs on Chinese goods. There's a fresh twist to the Jet Airways revival story. The head of the monitoring committee asked Sanjeev Kapoor to refrain from calling himself the CEO and stop making statements on behalf of the airline. Sources say the notice points out that the Jalan Kalrock consortium is yet to take over the airline. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs waves the green flag for Shipping Corporation of India to split its core and non-core businesses, paving the way for the government to divest a 63% stake in the company. Veteran left-wing leader Lula da Silva sworn in as Brazil's president for the 3rd term. His predecessor Bolsonaro flies out to Florida, skips the inauguration ceremony. Lula, in his first speech after taking charge, says, and I quote, "The nightmare is over." India rings in the new year with biryani, chole bhature and pizzas. Food delivery platform Swiggy reports a 120% jump in active users on New Year's Eve. Zomato records a 45% surge in order volumes. Well, let's go straight to the top story this evening. The Supreme Court has upheld the union government's 2016 decision to demonetize 500 and 1,000 rupee currency notes. In a majority verdict, a 5-judge constitutional bench of the Supreme Court ruled that the government was within its powers to issue the notification banning currency notes at a short notice. 4 judges upheld the decision-making process that led to demonetization, but 1 judge dissented, terming the decision unlawful and pulled up the government for not consulting Parliament and not giving enough time to the Reserve Bank of India to apply its mind. The court's proceedings were broadcast live for the public. Our colleague Ashmit Kumar has been tracking that. He joins us now with the details of the verdict. Ashmit, the upholding the decision-making process followed by the government. Take us through the key arguments of the majority judgment as well as the dissenting order.
Well, the 2016 demonetization exercise affected every person in India without prejudice, and this was the very reason it was a hugely political issue. It was political when being implemented, it was political when being debated and discussed in public spheres and newsrooms, and certainly political when challenged before the top court, which is why when the Supreme Court upheld the 2016 note ban, it handed the centre a huge political victory. Here are the details. The November 8th, 2016 announcement and the subsequent chaos was challenged in the top court in 58 petitions. The case was referred to a constitution bench of Supreme Court. Here, a 4:1 majority in the apex court has held that all is well with demonetization. The majority judgment, authored by Justice B.R. Gavai, held that centre has the power to demonetize any series of notes. Importantly, the court also held that it is irrelevant if the stated objectives of the note ban were met. The Supreme Court said that the question essentially was that whether or not due process was followed, and to that end, the Supreme Court held that notification directing demonetization was not flawed. Further, the Supreme Court's majority view is that it was proportional to the objectives that were laid out, which is to meet black money. Now, Supreme Court also held that there was a consultation between the centre and the RBI in the 6 months preceding the note ban. And finally, the court held that there was nothing unreasonable in the 52-day period provided to people for exchanging old currency notes for new ones. And with this, the Supreme Court has laid its stamp of approval on the 2016 demonetization exercise. Let's in fact listen in to Justice B.R. Gavai listing out the majority view.
The MP notification dated 8 November 2016 satisfies the test of proportionality and as such cannot be struck down on the said ground. The period provided for exchange of notes while the MP notification dated 8 November 2016 cannot be said to be unreasonable. The RBI does not possess independent power under subsection 2 of section 4 of the 2017 Act in isolation of the provisions of section 3 and 4(1) thereof to accept the demonetized notes beyond the period specified in notification.
But Justice B.V. Nagaratna, a part of the five-judge bench, did not agree with that view and gave a dissenting view. She criticized and questioned the note ban decision, citing multiple reasons. To begin with, first, she noted in her judgment that Centre's note ban proposal had to be backed by a law or at the very least an ordinance. She cautioned that without the parliament, democracy will not survive. Second, she frowned on how the RBI did not apply its mind to the issue since it wasn't allowed any time to do so by the centre. She noted how the decision was taken within 24 hours, not giving the central bank enough time to review or assess the impact. Speaking of the impact, she noted that the serious socio-economic implications of the note ban should have been considered by the central bank. And finally, she declared that while demonetization may have been well-intentioned and blessed with noble objectives, it did fall short on various legal grounds. And with that, she's declared the note ban to be an unlawful exercise. But while Justice B.V. Nagaratna's judgment may make for an interesting read, the bigger takeaway will be the overwhelming view of the majority of judges that has held that all is well and all is kosher with demonetization. On that note, let's listen in to Justice B.V. Nagaratna.
The measure is reflective of concern for the economic health and security of the country and demonstrates foresight. At no point of time has any suggestion been made that the measure was motivated by anything but the best intentions and noble objects for the betterment of the nation. The measure has been regarded as unlawful only on a purely legalistic analysis of the relevant provisions of the Act and not on the objects of demonetization.
Well, that's the five-judge constitutional bench, a majority 4-1 verdict in favour of the decision-making process adopted by the government, holding that the demonetization decision was lawful. One dissenting judgment, and as we heard there from Justice Nagaratna, on the back of legal measures. Reacting to the judgment, former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram said the country is obliged to accept the court's decision, but he went on to say, and I quote, however, it is necessary to point out that the majority has not upheld the wisdom of the decision, nor has the majority concluded that the stated objectives were achieved. In fact, the majority has steered clear of the question whether the objectives were achieved at all, end of quote. Meanwhile, BJP leader and former Law Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad has hailed the court's verdict, accusing the Congress leader Rahul Gandhi of creating chaos.
भाई राहुल गांधी बार बार ये हल्ला करते थे तो कभी आप समझने की कोशिश करते हैं क्या? क्योंकि राहुल गांधी जी के बारे में मैं एक बात कहूंगा, वो समझते हैं तभी जब कोर्ट का फैसला होता है, उसके पहले वो नहीं समझते। और मैं आपको एग्जांपल देता हूं, राफेल पर क्या क्या नहीं कहा उन्होंने। 19 का पूरा चुनाव जिस तरीके से उन्होंने हमारे प्रधानमंत्री के बारे में अपशब्द शर्मनाक कहे, उसको हम रिपीट नहीं कर सकते हैं। देश जनता ने जवाब दिया। जब सुप्रीम कोर्ट का फैसला आया तो ठंडे हो गए।
The Honorable Supreme Court has pronounced a verdict on the process of demonetization. In the verdict, the Honorable Supreme Court pronounced that Section 26(2) of the RBI Act of 1934, was it correctly applied on this decision or not? The majority Supreme Court verdict deals with the limited objective, limited issue of the process of demonetization, not with its outcomes.
Well, demonetization are well and truly behind us. Moving on, the Lal Street rings in the new year on a positive note. Nifty and the sensex gaining over 0.5%, but the mid-cap outperformance has helped keep the market breath in favour of advances. Metal stocks led from the front today. Nigel is standing by to take us through the trading action on day one of 2023. Well, global markets shut, Nigel, still celebrating the new year, but our markets trading and closing in the green.
Well, it was a good start to 2023 with the Nifty ending on a winning note. Though volumes were still a little bit lower, so it wasn't really houseful. The mid-cap and the small-cap indices, they started off a little bit better, and the hope is that 2023 will be a far better year for the broader markets in comparison to what the headline index is likely to do. The Nifty Bank, well, it managed to conquer the 20 DMA, which was a bit of a resistance zone, but just about. Now, if we're looking at the indices itself, just take a look at that. The mid-cap and the small-cap indices, both of them did outperform, which is heartening. But there were two sectors that were in focus today. Metal stocks, on optimism of China reopening. You had Hindalco as well as Tata Steel. Both of them were the biggest gainers on the Nifty itself. Jefferies did go ahead and upgrade the stocks, while the smaller names as well did do pretty well. Moil, there was a price increase out there, and SAIL, there's optimism that the entire Ferris pack will see improvement of profitability. That's the hope as of now, but metals did well. Auto stocks on the flip side, they had a mixed reaction to their numbers. Mahindra & Mahindra managed to end mildly higher. Bajaj Auto a little bit cautious on the exports, so that was a little bit lower. But the big winners were from the broader markets. SML Isuzu, the reopening trade is playing out there. Schools, colleges back, so that's why that stock was up 20%, while Atul Auto as well did end higher. There are other big winners. MCX was under pressure in trade today. They've renewed their contract with 63 boards. The hope was that they'll be resorting to a new system which will cut down costs. That didn't happen, so that was under some pressure. NCC won more orders, so that was higher. And from the IT pack itself, Persistent Systems was the big outperformer. The Nifty, not out of the woods yet again, because it needs to conquer that 18,250 to around 18,350. Nonetheless, it was a good start to the year.
Good start indeed, Nigel. Many thanks for joining us. So what can we expect in 2023? Two veteran investors, Ramdev Agarwal and Samir Arora, on how they view the year for the stock markets.
GST collections are very well held up. That's one data that gives you confidence that things are all right. So I think things are all right till November, December. So I think I would believe that 23 will be, we're starting in a very strong note of economic activity, heading into a lot of elections and things like that. And worst of global uncertainties, still the Ukraine war is on. Still inflation war is not over. China is still struggling with the COVID. So I think we have more of the same from 22. And hopefully first half will be somewhat like this. Second half, let's see.
If the rest of the world does badly, then we will surely outperform. Overall, I think this year I am starting in my mind on a positive note, because if I see the current issues, mostly related to US inflation and now maybe the COVID in China, the US inflation thing has been going on for quite some time. And in the next 2-3 months, I think by March, they would have finished their hikes and then they would pause for a long time, maybe the whole of this year. But at least it won't be hopefully incrementally negative
That's
news.
That's the expectation on the triggers for the markets. The rupee, meanwhile, kicked off the new year on a strong note, but retreated from early strength, ending at 82.73 against the greenback. This is bank spot dollars on behalf of importers. China's factory activity contracted for the third straight month in December. This is also the sharpest pace of contraction in nearly 3 years. The rise in COVID cases has led to large-scale disruption. The Purchasing Managers' Index fell from a reading of 48 in November to 47 in December. And speaking of China, the head of the IMF has warned that China is likely to grow at or below the global growth for the first time in 40 years. In conversation with CBS, Kristalina Georgieva said the three big economies, which are the US, European Union and China, are slowing down simultaneously, and the IMF expects 1/3 of the global economy to be in recession this year. Even as the world economy is bracing for a recession, manufacturing activity in India is at its highest level in more than 2 years. From a reading of under 56 in November, the Purchasing Managers' Index is now closer to a reading of 58, marking the highest increase in new factory orders and production in more than 2 years. Well, speaking of manufacturing, the auto industry reported a mixed set of sales numbers for December, while commercial vehicle sales registered a strong growth. India's leading car maker Maruti Suzuki and two-wheeler giant Bajaj Auto ended 2022 on a weak note. Sonia standing by with the details. Sonia.
Well, thanks a lot for that. I decided to, break it up into the strong and the weak numbers. And just to start off with the strong numbers first, Tata Motors was a very good set of numbers. Both the passenger vehicle as well as the commercial vehicle segment did quite well. In fact, the total domestic sales went up 10%, led largely by the medium and heavy commercial vehicle segment, which saw a growth of 34%. And Tata Motors posted its highest ever monthly as well as quarterly passenger vehicle sales. Let's move on to Ashok Leyland. In fact, the entire commercial vehicle piece has done really well. So Ashok Leyland, very strong sales in December, a total growth of 45% year-on-year. This was largely led by the medium and heavy commercial vehicle sales, which were up 61%, and that's because of a revival in bus demand. So bus sales have gone up by about 108% compared to same time last year. Let's move on to M&M now, where there was very strong traction both in the auto as well as the tractor segment for them. Auto sales went up 45% year-on-year, led largely by the new launches in the SUV segment. So SUV sales went up 62% year-on-year. quarter, coming in at over 28,300 units, while the tractor segment, both M&M as well as Escorts did very well. So the tractor sales for M&M went up 27% year-on-year. The company is saying that the Rabi crop sowing has progressed very well, while Escorts as well, total sales went up by almost about 19%. Now, on the weaker side, you had Maruti, Bajaj Auto and Royal Enfield numbers which were quite weak. Maruti's numbers, despite the management saying that, the retail sales are better, the wholesale numbers looked very weak. Total sales down 9% and domestic sales down about 10%. Bajaj Auto as well, big crack in the export numbers, which led to an overall fall of 22%, and export sales were down by almost about 40-odd%. And finally, Eicher Motors, Royal Enfield sales were below street expectations and down 7% compared to what we saw last year. Back to you.
Sonia, many thanks for joining us. And speaking of macroeconomic data, the Centre for Monitoring the Indian Economy reports that India's unemployment rate rose to 8.3% in December, hitting a 16-month high. Urban employment rose to above 10% versus nearly 9% in November. However, rural employment has seen a marginal slip to 7.4% in November versus 7.5%. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs waves the green flag for Shipping Corporation of India to split its core and non-core businesses. This has paved the way for the government to divest a 63% stake in the company. We are less than a month away from the union budget. RSS affiliate, the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, has recommended a hike in tariffs across the board for Chinese imports. The organisation says that Chinese imports are hurting India's manufacturing sector and leading to underutilization of capacity. Parikshit joins us now with more. Parikshit, well, the countdown to the budget has begun, almost a month away. Key recommendations coming in from the Swadeshi Jagran Manch with the focus on China.
Yes, they have flagged concerns about increasing imports from China, and they've said that there is a need to increase tariffs across the board. So Ashwini Mahajan, the convener of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, the trade body of the RSS, has gone on to say that we must increase weighted average tariff rate, which is at 6.2% currently, and there is scope to increase it by 3 to 5%. He also told us that the intention of the PLI schemes to increase India's image, increase India's manufacturing, is also contradictory to the tariffs that we have currently and the policy of reducing tariffs as well. He also went on to say that we must make efforts to attract more foreign companies, take advantage of the China Plus One strategy. On R&D, R&D spends are low, and this is a cause for concern. According to the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, we must make sure that it's mandatory for companies to spend a certain percentage of their profits or revenues on R&D. At the same time, we need level playing field for domestic investors when compared to foreign investors, and therefore the long-term capital gains tax must be reduced to incentivize domestic investors. Also telling the government to extend the one district, one product scheme to every district in the country so that local MSMEs can get a boost, local artisans can get a boost as well. On Manrega, they said that Manrega needs to be amended so that farmers can also use this scheme to employ more people, and this will generate more employment and make sure the issue of shortage of manpower is addressed as well.
All right, Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. Time for us to head into a short break. But up next, uncertainty over the relaunch of Jet Airways continues. Head of the Monitoring Committee asked Sanjeev Kapoor to refrain from calling himself the CEO. That and more when we get back. On to a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. Jet Airways revival plan has taken an interesting turn. Even as the uncertainty over the relaunch continues, we learned from sources that Jet Airways' erstwhile resolutional professional and the head of the monitoring committee, Ashish Chowcharia, has sent a notice to Sanjeev Kapoor objecting to his designation as the CEO of Jet Airways. The notice says Kapoor cannot call himself as the airline CEO until the ownership is transferred to the Jalan Kalrock Consortium. Madiha joins us now with more. Madiha, things getting more and more challenging for Jet's revival.
Yes, things are getting challenging for the Jalan Kalrock Consortium to restart the airlines, and there are more headwinds that the consortium is facing. The latest one is the notice that you mentioned by the erstwhile resolution professional and head of Jet Airways Monitoring Committee to Sanjeev Kapoor. Remember, the Jalan Kalrock Consortium that won the bid to revive Jet Airways had appointed Kapoor as the CEO of Jet Airways in April last year. But through this notice, the Monitoring monitoring committee is making it clear that it is still supervising the implementation of the resolution plan. It also makes it clear that the airline has not been taken over by the consortium yet, and hence Sanjeev Kapoor must refrain from using the designation of CEO of Jet Airways. The notice says Sanjeev Kapoor's tenure as CEO will commence only after the resolution plan achieves the effective date and the monitoring committee approves his appointment as the CEO of the airline. The notice very clearly states that using this designation in the current status could be misleading and can confuse the stakeholders. The notice further tells that Sanjeev Kapoor making statements on behalf of the airline could also be construed as misrepresentation. While one can question why has the monitoring committee taken so long to raise an objection, the timing of this notice coincides with some recent comments and articles by Sanjeev Kapoor on aviation-related matters where he spoke in the capacity of Jet Airways CEO. We reached out to the Jalan Calrock Consortium as well as Sanjeev Kapoor seeking comments on the notice, but we're still awaiting their response.
Yeah, many thanks for joining us. That is the latest there as far as Jet Airways is concerned. Now, over 1.65 lakh biryanis, over 16,000 chole bhatures and over 61,000 Domino's pizzas. That's what India ordered on Swiggy on New Year's Eve. Meanwhile, Zomato saw a 45% surge in order volumes versus 2021, while Blinkit got a single order worth over 21,000 rupees in Bangalore alone. Shilpa joins us now with India's favorite food, the most interesting orders and what excited customers on New Year's Eve. Shilpa.
Well, a large number of you may have been out partying on New Year's Eve, but if data from Swiggy and Zomato is anything to go by, an equally large amount of people brought in 2023 at home. And like every year, Swiggy and Zomato's top bosses were tweeting out the interesting statistics on what India was ordering in on the eve of New Year's. Now, expecting a huge rush through the night, orders started pouring in early, with Swiggy registering 1.3 million orders by 6:30 p.m. itself. Now, the platform, which saw active users jump over 126% that evening, saw most of its orders coming from Bengaluru, Hyderabad, then followed by Mumbai, Delhi, and then Chennai. And what did they order? Well, it's always biryani at the top of every food list. Now, even before 7:20 p.m., over 1.6 lakh biryanis were ordered for, and along with that, there were over 61,000 orders for pizzas from Domino's. Interestingly, many were also seeking comfort of home food, with more than 12,000 orders for khichdis being placed as well. Now, Zomato wasn't far behind either. Its order volumes were up 45%, and few of which the CEO Dipinder Goyal himself delivered as well. And at Zomato too, biryanis were among the most ordered, with nearly 16,500 of them being delivered before 7 p.m. itself. Now, more than all the full meals, it was nearly the party essentials or other groceries that were a hit during New Year's Eve. Now, look at these statistics. 1.76 lakh packets of chips, nearly 14,000 packets of nachos, 14,000 lemons, and nearly 15,000 sodas. And all these were ordered even before 9 p.m. Interestingly, there was some creativity at play too, with over 3,000 orders for stationery also being placed. And as the night progressed, orders for condoms too peaked, and not just for Instamart, but for Zomato's Blinkit as well. Now, Blinkit too delivered to hundreds of parties, over 56,000 packets of chips, 1.5 lakh lemons, a lot of peanuts, soda, tonic water, ice cubes, etc. And customers were generous to delivery partners as well, with the average tip amount being about 80 rupees. Now, in fact, Zomato CEO Dipinder Goyal tweeted that Zomato delivered more orders just this New Year's Eve than it did in all of the first 3 years of launching its food delivery service. A happy New Year indeed.
Well, certainly looks like that as far as food delivery platforms are concerned. Shilpa, many thanks for joining us. And on that note, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. Thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned. The news continues here on CNBC-TV18.